everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Ravi Sandepudi, CEO of Effectiv, a cutting-edge fraud and risk management platform. Ravi, I'm so excited to chat with you, not only because of what you're working on now with Effectiv, but also your background, your experience in terms of building and thinking about product. And you've had some interesting background experience. I won't spoil it for the audience here, but before we get into everything with Effectiv and what you're working on, especially in the fraud and risk space, and I know you focus a lot on the financial sector, which is obviously in the news. And so we'll break into some interesting questions around that. But what were you doing before you started the company? What were you doing before you started Effectiv?
Yeah, thanks, Julian. By the way, thanks a lot for the opportunity. Really excited to speak with you. But yeah, getting back to your question, Julian. So I started off my career at Google, was part of their risk and trust and safety team. So we basically build policies, systems, technology to detect fraud and abuse across various Google products. Spend quite a bit of time on search and ads and products like Google Pay. We try to identify transaction fraud, account takeovers, money laundering, and scenarios of that sort. After left to join a startup called Simility, I was the first employee there. So that's when I got my first exposure into startups, could see building startups firsthand, though I was not a founder, but a very early employee at Simility as well. They were building fraud detection software. We eventually found our quote unquote product market fit in the enterprise banking space. So we had customers like US Bank, Discover, Synchrony in Brazil and so on. We eventually got acquired by PayPal in 2018. So again, a great outcome. I was very, very lucky there, right? So it's not your first startup, and generally it's not that common that you succeed with the first startup, but yeah, I was very lucky. We had amazing founders. Right? So they were really great leaders. I learned a lot from them. Then again, as part of PayPal, we saw firsthand how good acquisitions can work out. So it was a really, really good fit, and we really flourished PayPal's umbrella. So again, got to work on really high scalable, super critical systems within PayPal, again, in the fraud detection space. So got great exposure, worked with great people there. And then the startup bug bit us again. and then, after working for a few years at PayPal, myself and I have 3 other co-founders, all 3 of them were also early Simility and then subsequent PayPal folks. And 4 of us stepped out to start Effectiv. And again, we are continuing in the fraud detection space. So this is my 17th or 18th year. I know it reveals my age a little bit, but this is a area 4 of us are super passionate about. We couldn't imagine ourselves working in any other space. But the more important thing is we found that it's still an unsolved problem, huge opportunities. I'll speak a little bit about this in the coming minutes as well. But the opportunities were great. We were super passionate about the topic. We had a little bit of a background in the space as well. So everything fit in really well.
And I'm curious, for those of us who aren't familiar, what are the common ways that you can detect fraud? And what are some ways that companies or even individuals and customers who use products are kind of exposed for these different, I'm not sure whether it's hacks or whether it's identity information that they grab. What are the common ways that you see fraud detected? And also, what are the common things that people will do? One thing I recently learned is that it's like a group of people who start to do these attacks. And it's really more of like a team. It's almost like a company of sorts. And they're so strategic and organized. So what are the common ways you see in fraud being not only detected, but also how are they using fraud to gather people's information? And is it just information or is it more?
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I think I would just say that as consumers, we don't see most of this happening behind the scenes, but just trust me, the banks and financial institutions do a lot. They're really they have sleepless nights trying to protect their customers. But I started to appreciate it at Simility and at Effectiv. But I mean, for a layman like you and I, Julian, I think the most obvious kind of fraud that we would face is identity theft, right? Like you mentioned. So someone steals our credentials, users' name or social security number to open up accounts, apply for loans, and then just disappear, right? So that's a pretty common use case. And nowadays, I think that's on quote unquote the account opening sites. Someone applies for an account or a loan on your name. The second very common use case is actually transaction fraud, where either they steal your credentials, right? Let's say you have like a Venmo app, so they use your credentials to move money out, or which is something that's getting a lot more popular is like social fraud, right? So someone like the dating fraud, so someone like try to create like relationships and then coax you into sending money to them. Also the elder fraud where fraudsters target like older folks and again like try to coax them into sending money. I mean we've seen the Netflix show. And so that's a very common, that's getting very common, right? Especially with the proliferation of real-time payments where you can move money immediately. Right? Previously it was checks and ACH where there was some opportunity to pull back money because there's some time before the money moved, but with Venmo and Zelle and RTP and so on, these social engineering frauds are really proliferating.
And from an institutional level, I know you work with credit unions and banks and other kind of organizations. From an institutional level, are they feeling attacks kind of brute force going through, say, firewalls and all the security measures, or is it more of a kind of a strategic and internal thing where I know one thing I've gotten before is a message from an email from a CEO asking me to do a specific task in a very obscure way. But is it all like that? Are we seeing attacks internally and are they becoming more sophisticated, and how are they becoming sophisticated?
No, great question, Julian. So I think hit the nail on the head, right? So I think the most common, but also the area where there's been a lot of development and sophistication is on like the cyber threat side, where there are hackers trying to like hack into your system, steal credentials, and then either like blackmail the financial institution into paying them before releasing the data back, or actually using that data to log in and move funds out, right? So so those two things, but now there's some great cybersecurity companies in place, and a lot of financial institutions now, even in the US, are highly encouraged to have cybersecurity insurance now, right? So that the customers don't get impacted, at least financially. But then the second is the social stuff, right? Which is a great example that you said, someone taking over the CEO's email address or some senior executive's email address and then using it to email like the finance department to wire the funds, right? Or in this case, writing to the bank or calling the bank saying that, hey, I'm calling from so-and-so, org, I have a huge account with you. I urgently need to pay a vendor. Please wire this money to this account, right? So that social engineering definitely happens. The other thing that banks and financial institutions face is synthetic ID fraud. This is what the customers don't face the heat of this, but the banks do, where someone just completely fabricates an identity, right? So they'll use they'll call themselves Julian, they'll use my SSN, someone else's email address, a completely fabricated identity, and then create an account, apply for a loan, and then disappear, right? So the bank gets hit very badly because of it. And the other thing is first party fraud, right? So someone applying for a loan with no intention to repay the loan, right? Or applying for a card with no intention to pay back the expenses on the card. So this is called like first party fraud. So someone doing fraud on their own name. So that's getting pretty common as well. Especially, I mean, during economic downturns, people take advantage of these loopholes.
Right. And when they're doing that, or I guess in the ecosystem of fraud and attacks and things like that we think about, is it that they're getting more sophisticated, or is it that the volume of them is increasing? What are you seeing from an institution customer level that we're unaware of? It like I said, is it an increase in activity, or is it sophistication, or is it both? What have you in your experience?
Yeah, I think fraud has been always there. We're getting to know about it a lot more right now. But at the same time, fraud detection is a cat and mouse game, right? So you build systems, you build AI models to detect certain kinds of behavior and stop, but the fraudsters just try to keep getting around it, right? it's an exciting space from a technical point of
Yeah.
view because it's a never solved problem, but it has real
Yeah.
money being lost. So yeah, I think one, the volume of attacks are just going up, right? Because the attack vector is now much larger, right? So there are about 10,000 banks and credit unions in the US itself. There are now thousands and thousands of fintechs that are built on top of these banks, right? So neobanks, card issuing companies, and so on. So no, there's so much activity happening in the financial sector. Customers like you and I have so many options, right?
Yeah.
For financial services, you can just download an app, create an account, and you'll get a credit card shipped to your home within a day, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's so many of these products now. So the attack vector for fraudsters is growing, right? So now they can target the fintech, or they can target the bank, or
Right.
other like special financial services companies that are popping up. So the volume is growing for sure. And then
Yeah.
with technology, right, the sophistication is also definitely growing, right? The same AI deep learning models that we use to detect fraud are also being used by the fraudsters to defraud, right? So that's
Yeah.
two. And the third is the sophistication in social engineering, right? Like we
Right.
discussed before, they're getting smarter and smarter, even beyond technology to people into sending money to them, right? So this is called, like friendly fraud or elder fraud and so on,
Yeah.
where you are the one actually sending them the money, but so the bank can't do anything, right? Because you put in your credentials, you send the money, but the point is someone actually defrauded you. Right. Yeah, it started off with the Nigerian prince thing way back
Yeah.
when, but now it's
And now
gotten
it's
so
like
much
people
more
still,
sophisticated.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Now they're grabbing people from your actual life and putting you in scenarios.
Exactly.
I
Right.
remember knowing someone who went through a scenario where it was like they had bought a ticket, then an agent had transferred their number, and they had to get a gift card, and it was all this whole gambit to purchase the
Wow.
gift
Yeah.
card.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
The social engineering, it's like it's putting somebody into a pressure cooker in a tight
Right.
situation, trying to capture them, and
Exactly. Yep.
it's successful. It's so successful in how
Yeah.
much we know about people's behaviors. And before we go deeper into AI and especially a lot of questions around AI, especially nowadays with ChatGPT really popularizing
Right.
AI movement
Yep.
overall. I'm not
Mhm.
saying that it's doing anything similar to what you're doing, but it's popularizing the
Right.
idea of its
Definitely.
value. It's a tool.
Yes.
But thinking about Effective, discuss with the audience a little bit of you talked about it, that startup bug kind of you had an itch that you need to scratch. Tell us what Effective does, the problem that inspired you, and also what were people using before Effective? Discuss that.
Yeah. No, for sure. So Julian, yeah, with Effective, I mean, we did this in the past with Similarity, right? But with Effective, our main goal was to serve more mid-sized financial institutions. So like you mentioned, credit unions, community banks, other mid-sized lending companies, and then fintechs, right? So all of them, quote unquote, fall into the mid-sized segment of financial services industry. So that was our goal, right? To serve them. Prior to that, there are a lot of very sophisticated solutions for the enterprise sector, right? Like the big
Yeah.
banks, like Chase and BOA. They had access to really, really sophisticated systems. Similarity was that one example, but there are a bunch of other folks that were building to them. And they had the in-house resources to build systems as well, right?
Yeah.
They were building, like using pretty sophisticated AI and so on. But the smaller financial institutions don't have that,
Yeah.
right? So they don't have the people, the skill set, and even the monetary resources to do that. And in the US, 2/3 of US population bank with a credit union or a community bank, right? So
Right.
they are extremely valuable to the American society, and they drive most of the small businesses in the country, right? So they're very, very critical to the economy. And we felt that this was a huge missed opportunity, right? So there's so many such financial institutions that are so critical to our society, but not getting the same access to technology that the bigger folks do, mainly for multiple reasons, right? Like they cannot pay that
Right.
much. They don't have the skill set to maintain and
Right.
like build solutions on top of sophisticated systems. So what we did was go back to the drawing board and figure out, is there a way to build an enterprise grade fraud detection platform for these folks, right? Can we
Yeah.
bring down our costs so that we can charge them appropriately? Can we make our system simple enough for 20 employee credit union to use us and then have as good as fraud protection as Chase, right? So
Right.
with that intention, we were trying to build Effective because one really sophisticated technology is now available, right? So especially the machine learning side and AI side, where we could do this very economically and can do it at scale. And two, like building on cloud and other technologies that are available, which can really bring down software
Right.
costs, right? So if you are able to reduce our unit costs, then we can charge that much lower to our
Yeah.
customers as well. So I think technology, domain knowledge, all that kind of worked for us
Yeah.
to build something for them. And with Effective, because we are serving this segment of folks, we try to build a full risk infrastructure for them, right? So we want
Mhm.
to become their risk quote unquote engine for a credit union or a bank. So we operate across the board, right? So starting from onboarding, like we discussed, it could be a loan application, a deposit account opening application, card application,
Right.
BNPL event, whatever it is. So we do fraud checks there from KYC to money laundering to
Yeah.
synthetic ID fraud and so on, followed by transactions. So the financial institution can monitor wires, ACH, Zelle, RTP,
Yeah.
check deposits, any ATM withdrawals, all of those on Effective as well. And also monitor things like login, PIN change, password
Yeah.
change, those kinds of within
Yeah.
Effective. And the interesting part is the more that they enable, the better every evaluation gets, right? Because
Right.
that if Effective gets to see both check deposits as well as ATM withdrawals, we are now getting more data about the user, so we are able to build better heuristic. We get to know, hey, like Julian deposits checks on the 16th, and on the 1st of every month, ATM withdrawals are at 11 a.m. in the morning at a
Yeah.
Walmart. So we are able to create all of these heuristics about the users and members, and we are
Yeah.
able to predict and also detect anomalous behavior in a very, very fine-grained way.
It's so fascinating thinking about the way you protect and how you kind of assess risk and things like that. I think a lot of times we commonly think that you're almost at like an AI or a battle between the attacker and your own sophisticated software. But from what I'm hearing, it's more so better understanding the users and their behaviors,
Right.
the types of
Exactly.
transactions. Yeah. And so are you essentially, when you say detect risk, is it just some kind of behavior that's outside of the norm? And then how do you know if one thing is like, how do you know if that's just like them taking a vacation versus actually somebody taking their transactions? Is the model just kind of trained more sophisticated? Like you said, you have more evaluations, you understand your user that much more in their behaviors. But is there any case where that is makes a wrong assumption? Let's say I'm on vacation, or say I've moved but didn't inform my bank. Are there
Right.
things around that where the model say doesn't always predict it correctly? Yeah, curious what you have to say about that.
Yeah. Excellent question, Jordan. Man, about this topic. I don't expect it, but that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, exactly that, right? Like first, because we are not just creating heuristics and models at a particular user level, we are also looking at the overall population, right? There are certain things that you can actually observe that, like, okay, folks living in San Francisco might holiday and I don't know, like might be in Tahoe on the weekends, right?
Right.
So something like that. So there are these overall population trends that we are able to look at and reduce what we call as false positives, right? So
Yeah.
um,
Right.
so even though you generally live in San Francisco, but hey, suddenly there's an ATM withdrawal in Tahoe. So that it means maybe this is the first time you are going to Tahoe, but a lot of population trends where this kind of behavior we have seen in the past, and this is
Yeah.
good behavior, right? So,
Right.
so we are able to fall back on overall population behavior when there's something that when we have noticed some anomaly at a user level, right? So we create these models and trends at both the levels. And that's how we try to reduce these quote unquote, what we call as false positives.
Right.
But there's also a very strong feedback loop, right? And we can take what we call as like step up verifications, right? So let's say there's the first time you're seeing an anomaly, maybe we need not block the transaction, right? So we just notify you with a message, right? The second time we see an anomaly or a bigger anomaly, then we pause the transaction and call you for verification, or we request a two-factor auth, right? The bigger, if the anomaly is even bigger, then we stop or block the card for you, right? Without you taking it, and wait for you to call the bank back and enable and so on. And if it's even further, like let's say you're seeing a transaction happening from a known botnet or a Tor node or from a cloud IP address and things of that sort, then we just block the account, right? So we can take these step up actions that can start from very like a small action, like just notifying you, right? Hey, the transaction has, if it is not you, just let us know, right? But we'll let it go.
Right.
From there to all the way to blocking the bank account itself, we can have these step up checks. And if let's say we ask you for a two-factor and you have authenticated, then there's a quick feedback where our model quickly learns that, okay, yeah, this was a false positive. So we took too harsh a decision. So next time we see an action that is very similar, either for Julian or for anyone else who fits the Julian profile, we'll take a more lenient action, right? So that's how we try to keep addressing this issue. Like ensure the customer has great experience, but at the same time protect them from fraud. It's a very delicate balance between the two, but with AI and the way that we are able to retrain models at speed, this is getting more and more possible.
Yeah, it's so fascinating also thinking about the two-factor authorization, excuse me, and also and how much kind of human input is still involved in training these models from like the customer standpoint. And it's so fascinating to think about how that kind of, it works in, it's not like one, it's all on a platform through software. It does take inputs that learn and train itself. So it's so fascinating to think about how sophisticated it could even more grow in terms of its accuracy. Right. In detecting fraud, or also just understanding behaviors and things like that. And I'm curious, and I'd love for you to tell the audience, tell us a little bit more about your traction. How many customers do you have now? What's been exciting about the recent growth that you've seen, but also what are you looking forward to in not only this year, but in the years to come in terms of the direction the company's going?
Yeah. So it's just been little over a year since we've been in the market. So we started the company mid 2021, but the first 6 months were heads down product building. And in early 2022 was when we actively started selling. We've had a really great first year and we are very lucky. We now have about 13 customers across fintechs and banks and credit unions using us very actively. Like the fraud detection is a very critical piece in the flow, right? Because they stop, wait for our response and continue. Either it's an application for a loan or an account or a transaction. We are in the critical flows. So it's very important that from a systems point of view, both our efficacy is high, but we are also very, very stable and scalable, right? From purely a systems perspective. So all of that has been working well. Like we haven't had a single second of downtime over the last 1 year.
Pretty impressive.
Touch wood. But it's been great. I think it also comes back to our team's experience building these systems in the past, so we could just build on top of what we've learned so far, right? That was pretty advantageous for us. And yeah, we're given the first year success, we are very ambitious this year. We want to grow our customer base even more. So yeah, very, very excited. We have about 25 people now. We are a fully remote and distributed team, so which has also been very interesting building that out. And it's been working great for us because we are across all time zones across the
Yeah.
globe. So we are able to provide great customer service to our customers, right? Because nowadays, like finance doesn't stop when you sleep, right? So
Right.
transactions happening 24/7, and there's someone on our team at any point in time of the day. So that's online and monitoring
Yeah.
the systems. So,
That's incredible. And thinking about whether it's externally or internally, what are some of the biggest risks that Effective faces today?
yeah, I mean, we are a small company. I think obviously the things happening in the banking sector right now was a little scary. We were also SVB customers. We had a sleepless weekend,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
things worked out well. I think we are so grateful to FDIC and the US government stepping in. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously we expected the same and when held through, very grateful. But yeah, I mean, we were a little worried on hey, selling to banks, how would it change, right? So would
Sure.
banks be a lot more careful, especially trusting new vendors? Would they even procure new vendors and so on? But
Right. Yeah.
fraud is so critical, right? What we are seeing is actually the spike up since those events that just people want to really improve on their risk management systems
Yeah.
across the board, right? It could be credit risk, fraud risk, compliance risk, all those kind of things. And if we provide better economics, I think the banks are willing to switch to new emerging technologies a
Yeah.
lot more nowadays, which wasn't the case few years ago, right? If they had a
Right.
system in place that was working somewhat, they really had no motivation to switch to a new vendor, right? So,
Right.
but now they're very eager, right? And if you're doing something cool, I mean, that like next level, and you're able to reduce costs for them, and they have the
Yeah.
same interest level as a fintech. So, so that's been very eye opening, right? And we want to
Yeah.
really take advantage of that increased interest and go very aggressive this year in building
Yeah.
up business.
It's so exciting to think about how much behavior has changed with a lot of even traditional organizations, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
if you're not looking for the newest technology that's up to date, because things are moving at such a rapid pace, that
Exactly.
you often find yourself behind in whether it's protecting
Right.
your customers or even just
Yeah.
running an efficient organization. I mean, there's so many
Exactly.
quote unquote legacy technologies that are starting to get ripped
Right.
out and either replacement
Yep.
technologies. I'm sure you've seen and you've built that
Yeah.
Effective is being less and less cumbersome to actually implement into organizations because of
Exactly.
not having to host on their own server, being able to use the
Yes.
cloud and
Yes. Exactly.
taking
Yep.
all that weight essentially from the technical side
Right.
outside of the organization and thinking about all the possibilities and if everything goes well, what's the long-term vision for Effective?
Right. Right. No. Yeah. For sure, Julian. I think the first wave was the pandemic. I mean, with the lockdown, a lot of banks and credit unions had to go digital, right? So they had to move their account onboarding transactions. So no more like going to the branch to open up an account or
Yeah.
apply for a loan or even like deposit physical checks, right? So everything moved digital. And once you move digital, again, you get exposed to different vectors of fraud, right? And you no longer can use a 30-year-old fraud detection system, which takes batch files, end of day
Yeah.
to process. Right? So,
Right.
so there was already a strong motivation for a lot of them, like you said, even within smaller banks,
Yeah.
to adopt new technologies. And then with the proliferation of AI, like you said, again, fraudsters are using it. If the banks don't use, then they'll be in a really bad place, right?
Yeah.
So I think adopting new technologies, going to the cloud, which again saves so much cost, and it is actually a lot more secure than having systems on premise, right? So them getting more comfortable using cloud software, things costing less, people getting more efficient, having more sophisticated systems in place. So everything works out really well for the banks. So yeah, I think our vision is to really change the game for banks and credit unions, especially the mid-sized ones who we felt like I said, very underserved, but I think everyone, I mean, even our like competitors and so on, I would like really urge them to look at the sector. I think they are very eager to work with tech companies like us. And I think it's a great opportunity, right? And I know it might sound cliched, but I think there's an overall greater good, right? So if you help
Right.
credit unions perform as well as big banks, the economy just gets far better, right? They can serve small businesses better. They can common folks like us better, and people need not rely. I mean, yeah, like yeah, every financial institution would be safe, right?
Right.
So you need
Right.
not just move all your money to Chase or BOA
Right.
and feel like you're safer there, because that would just tilt the balance of power to the bigger folks.
Yeah, I love that. And as technology continues to grow and expand, how accessible it is to, like you
Yes.
said, kind of downhill and or those who aren't as large or don't have an infrastructure or don't have teams around them, say a chief security officer or somebody who deals with that sector in
Right.
particular with the technologies and platforms that it's almost like having that unit already kind of built in and plugged into your company. And I'm sure you're working on more ways to make it simple and easier and work more in tandem with your. I love this next section, and we'll breeze through it real quick. But I love to ask some founder FAQs, so I'm going to ask you some rapid fire
Mhm.
questions and see where we
Sure.
get. So, first question is: thinking about just selling into mid market or mid sized kind of companies, what are some of the challenges you face? Being that might be restrictions in the team that they have, or the technology,
Yep.
or current infrastructure. What are some challenges that you were unforeseen when you started selling into this kind of base? And what are some of the benefits in terms of being associated with those customers or working with those customers? What have you seen was a challenge and
Yeah.
what's been a benefit?
Yeah, great. Actually, both was the same thing.
Yeah,
So the
really?
challenge was actually getting into that space, right? So it's a very close knit community.
Yeah.
Like all the credit unions work very closely with each other. All the community banks work very closely with each other because they don't compete, right? They have very clear charters.
Right.
Unlike retail banks or commercial banks, like they don't compete for the same person or the same account. So they're very collaborative, right? So for a new vendor to crack into that space, you had to really win some accounts, work very hard,
Yeah.
convince them, win their trust before you enter. But once you won the trust of, we are seeing that they are so much more open to recommending you to their peers, right? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of word of mouth. So the same point that was a slight barrier to enter into that
Yeah.
space has now become a big advantage for us, right? So once
Yeah.
you've entered that, they really want to ensure their peers are successful as well. So
Yeah.
if you got a few of them as your customers, but made them successful, then I think you're set out to succeed.
I love that. I love that. And another question I like to ask, being that a lot of companies are adopting blockchain and crypto assets as another asset class, and kind of thinking about the sophistication behind that technology, not only being able to look through it and validate a transaction, but also make sure that transaction was completed. There's no fraud in there, as we've seen so many
Correct.
different things happen within the crypto space about when it's kind of in this limbo period. There could be a bad actor taking out money and not
Right.
fulfilling a transaction. How have you been incorporating a lot of that technology into fraud detection? And what's particularly, if you have, what's particularly nuanced about that isn't similar to Web 2 technology that you have to consider when creating and building?
Yeah, great question. We actually do have a few crypto companies using us as well. The interesting thing is more and more of them are getting regulated similar to like fiat money financial services, right? So they have to go through KYC, fraud checks before onboarding someone onto their wallet or things of that sort. So the problems are very similar, quote unquote, on ramp, right? So
Yeah.
when they're onboarding someone within the crypto ecosystem, things get very different. You need to have slightly different technologies to look at on-chain transactions and able to identify fraud and money laundering on the chain. That's a very sophisticated space in itself. We are not, I would be lying if I say we are experts there, but we partner with some of the experts in that ecosystem, use their knowledge and and technology within our platform to adjudicate that. Then within the ecosystem where we are operating, this is still fairly new, but getting a lot of attention, right? Even banks and credit unions are very, very eager to provide crypto related services to their members and customers. So we are seeing that happen, but right now we are in that on ramp phase, right? So where it's still somewhat similar to fiat money related services, but I think ourselves and everyone else in this ecosystem really need to ramp up their game in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I always like to ask this next question because I think founders are awesome in the ways that they extract knowledge from anything that they ingest. So whether it was early in your career or now, what books or people have influenced you the most?
Oh, this was actually recommended by my co-founder, but I've started reading this book called Challenger Sales. I'm sure a lot of you and Julian, you might have heard of it. I think it's like for a tech and product founder who started a company, get onto sales, man. This is so much more critical, and it is so much more a science than an art. I think the media portrays it as if people are born with it, but you can learn it like any other science. And I think I would recommend any founder learning sales the day that they start their company, right? I think we did a mistake. I mean, me personally, though, my co-founders are pushing very hard on picking it up. I never paid enough attention, and I regret it for the first 6 months, right? I was just like, hey, heads down, let's build the product, it'll sell itself and so on. But that's not the case, right? And I was very lucky to have really great co-founders who picked up the slack there. But yeah, read up, gobble up all the sales books that you can. I mean, there are different kinds of techniques like Medic and all that kind of stuff, but there's something that will work really well for you. And the early days is when you have to experiment very quickly, right? Like what methodologies, what kind of sales setup and funnels are going to work for, and GTM strategies are going to work for you. So you can do that experimentation easily only in the early days. So try it out. Start reading sales books. Sorry to suggest such a drab topic, but it's critical.
Yeah. No, a lot of founders bring it up on the podcast about the necessity to learn sales and just a general function of how to not only get new customers, but also to kind of identify the sales culture for the company moving forward. Right. What works in your sector? What conversations are you having? What rejections are you seeing? And it's like almost like a data download in the beginning to figure out. You're almost training your own model in terms of your operation and sales motion to try to figure out the methodology and how to communicate. And it's brought up a lot, so it's not a drab topic. It's definitely one I think more founders have a similar experience where they're like, I needed to have learned it a little earlier, but once you kind of get into the motion of building a company, you understand how critical, especially at the CEO level, and building those relationships and getting people to trust and then obviously then there's a host of new problems that you have to address in your life. I always like to ask this. I always like to make sure we don't miss anything. And before, obviously, I know we're coming close to the end of the episode. I want to get your websites, and your plugs, and your LinkedIn's. But before we do that, is there any question I didn't ask you that I should have or that you would have liked to answer?
No, this was wonderful, Julian. I had such a great time speaking with you. Yeah, I mean, like, if you're interested, anyone's interested in the financial space or fraud space, like we are super open to speaking with you, especially if you're early founders. We would love to share the mistakes that you've done and give whatever small advice we can. But yeah, I mean, fintech and financial space is always super exciting.
Yeah. And so
I would encourage a lot of you to try. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Changing so much nowadays.
Yeah. Well, last little bit, Ravi, tell us where we can find you. Give us your websites, your LinkedIn's, where we can not only support you as a founder, but also Effectiv and what the technology is doing and being a fan of the mission that you're driving. And who knows, if we're a customer, how can we get in touch and start using the technology?
No, of course. Yeah. Please write to me any time of the day. I have a 2-year-old kid, so I don't sleep. So I'm on, my email is Ravi, Ravi at Effectiv, EFFECTIV. There's no E at the end, .ai. Write to me at any point in time. Our website is effectiv.ai. search for Effective AI on LinkedIn. Please follow our page there. Same thing on Twitter. Please follow us on Twitter. But please do write to me at any point in time. Either you want to try out a product or just want to chat about the space. Always open for it.
Amazing. Ravi, it's so incredible not only learning about your background, your experience with startups, but what you're doing at Effective, how the technology works, what are the challenges that you're facing in terms of the customer that you're addressing and the space that you're addressing. It's such a pleasure learning all those insights, advice for other founders as well. And so I hope you enjoyed yourself on the show today. I'm excited to see what's going to come of Effective in the next few years. And we'll have to do maybe a second round, but I hope you enjoyed yourself. And thank you again for being on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Julian. This was so great. Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Of course.